What would you do if one single sentence, something as simple as "I don't know," could be the difference between walking away and losing everything you own? Right now, I want you to imagine the scene. You're driving home. It's late. The roads are empty. You see those flashing red and blue lights in your rearview mirror. Your heart does that thing where it skips a beat, then starts pounding twice as fast. You pull over. The officer walks up to your window. The flashlight comes on. And then they ask you a question. A specific question. One that sounds so casual, so harmless, that 99% of people answer it without thinking twice. But here's what I need you to understand. That question is a trap. And one wrong answer, literally just one word, can hurt you instantly. Not metaphorically. Not eventually. Right then, on the spot. Before we go any further, I want you to comment right now. Have you ever been pulled over? What was the first thing the officer asked you? Just put "first question" in the comments. I'll wait. Seriously, do it right now. Because I promise you, by the end of this video, you're going to realize that almost every single person gets this wrong. Most people think that if you're innocent, you have nothing to worry about. Just answer the questions, cooperate, be polite, and you'll be on your way. That's what we've been told our entire lives. That's what movies show. That's what your parents probably told you. But that's not reality. And that assumption that innocent means safe is exactly what law enforcement relies on. And I'm not saying this to scare you. I'm saying this because knowledge is the only thing that levels the playing field. Very few people understand how a single answer to one specific question can completely change the trajectory of a routine traffic stop. I've spent months studying police interrogation tactics, real court cases, body cam footage, and interviews with former officers and defense attorneys. The pattern is undeniable. Here's exactly what you're going to learn today. First, the one question you will almost certainly be asked. Second, why your natural instinct to answer it is wrong. Third, the psychological reason why police ask it in the first place. Fourth, what to say instead, the exact words. And fifth, real-world examples where the wrong answer destroyed someone's life. Stay with me, because this next part really matters. Let's start with the question. You're sitting in your car, the officer has your license and registration, they come back to your window, and they say with a completely straight face, almost friendly, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" Pause right there. That's the question. Sounds innocent, right? They're just asking if you know what you did. Maybe you were speeding, maybe you rolled through a stop sign, maybe your taillight is out, and most people immediately answer. They say things like, "Oh, I think I was going a little fast," or "My registration might be expired," or "I didn't realize I drifted into that lane." But here is where things go wrong. And I mean catastrophically wrong. When you answer that question, you are not just having a conversation. You are doing something that very few people understand. You are giving a verbal confession. You are admitting to a violation before the officer has even formally accused you of anything. And in court, that admission, those few words, becomes evidence. Think about that for a second. You just did their job for them. You removed any requirement for them to prove you knew what you did. You handed them the case on a silver platter. But wait, there's a deeper layer here that almost nobody talks about. The officer doesn't actually care whether you know why they pulled you over. Not really. They already know why. They saw something. They have a reason. That's why they flipped on the lights. So why ask? This is where the psychology gets fascinating and a little uncomfortable. Police are trained in what's called conversation management, and one of the most effective tools in that toolbox is the open-ended, seemingly harmless question that triggers your social conditioning. From the time you were a child, you were taught to answer questions from authority figures, teachers, parents, bosses, and police. Your brain is wired to comply. It feels wrong to say anything other than a direct answer. It feels rude, it feels suspicious, and that is exactly what they are counting on. Here's the pattern interrupt you need to lock into your brain right now. The officer is not your friend. They are not trying to help you. They are doing a job, and that job is to gather evidence. That's it. Their goal is not to be fair. Their goal is to build a case, and the easiest way to build a case is to get you to build it for them. So let me ask you a question, and I want you to be honest with yourself. If an officer asked you right now, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" What would you say? Don't just think about it. Actually say it out loud, or better yet, type it in the comments. I'm serious. Type what you think you would say, because I want to show you something. Most people will type something like, "I'd say no," or "I'd ask them why," and that's actually better than admitting guilt. But here's the problem. Even saying no can be used against you. Because if you say no, and then the officer tells you why, and you later try to fight the ticket or the charge, the prosecution can argue that you didn't know the law, that you were unaware, that your denial of knowledge shows a lack of attention. I know that sounds like a stretch, but I've seen it happen in real court transcripts. So what's the right way? What do you actually say? This is where most online advice gets it wrong. People will tell you to just say, "I'm going to remain silent," or "I don't answer questions." And technically, that's your right. The Fifth Amendment protects you from self-incrimination. You do not have to answer. But here's the thing nobody tells you. In a routine traffic stop, immediately stonewalling, an officer can escalate the situation. It can make them suspicious. It can turn a 5-minute stop into a 45-minute ordeal. It can lead to them calling a K9 unit. It can lead to them asking you to step out of the car. It can lead to a search. So you need a middle path. You need something that protects your rights without triggering their suspicion. And there is an answer that works. An answer that defense attorneys literally teach their clients. An answer that is polite, cooperative, and legally bulletproof. Here it is. When the officer asks, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" you look them in the eye, calmly, respectfully, and you say this: "I'm not sure, officer. I try to follow all traffic laws." That's it. Let me break down why that works, because the psychology here is brilliant. First, "I'm not sure" is not a lie. You genuinely don't know for certain why they stopped you. You might have a guess, but you don't know. Second, "I try to follow all traffic laws" does two things. It establishes that you are a law-abiding person, and it subtly puts the burden back on the officer to state the specific reason without you admitting anything. You haven't confessed, you haven't denied, you haven't been rude, you haven't invoked the Fifth Amendment in a way that sounds combative. You've simply stated your general intention to be a good driver. Now I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking, but isn't it better to just be honest? If I was speeding, shouldn't I just own up to it? Won't that make the officer more likely to give me a warning? That is exactly the myth I want to destroy right now. Because that logic sounds good in theory, but in reality, it fails, over and over again. Let me give you a real-world example. There's a body cam video that went viral a few years ago. A young woman gets pulled over for going 7 miles over the speed limit. The officer walks up. He asks, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" She smiles, relaxes, and says, "Oh yeah, I was probably speeding a little. I'm so sorry. Long day at work." She thinks she's being honest and respectful. The officer nods, takes her license, goes back to his car, and comes back with a ticket. $240. She later finds out that in that jurisdiction, officers have full discretion to issue a warning or a fix-it ticket for minor infractions. But because she admitted guilt immediately, the officer didn't have to prove anything. The case was closed. The ticket wrote itself. Now compare that to another case. Same state, same speed limit, different driver. Officer asks the question. Driver says, "I'm not sure, officer. I try to follow all traffic laws." Officer pauses. He says, "Well, I clocked you at 7 over?" Driver says nothing, just listens. Officer takes the license, goes back to his car, and comes back with a warning. Why? Because the officer didn't have an admission. He knew that if he wrote a ticket, the driver could fight it in court. And without an admission, the officer would have to prove the radar was calibrated, prove the reading was accurate, prove the officer's training was current. It's not that the officer was being nice, it's that the driver didn't make it easy, and when you don't make it easy, the path of least resistance for the officer is often just a warning. This is the game, and you didn't even know you were playing, but here's where we need to go deeper. Because the question, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" is just the beginning. It's the entry point. What comes next can be even more dangerous. Because once the officer tells you the reason, the next question is often even more loaded. "Have you been drinking tonight? Is there anything illegal in the vehicle? Do you mind if I take a look around?" And every single one of these questions is designed for one purpose: to get your consent. Because here's the legal reality that most people don't understand. Without probable cause, an officer cannot search your car. They can't just open your trunk because they feel like it. They can't go through your glove box. They can't ask you to empty your pockets. They need either probable cause, which is a high legal standard, or they need your consent. And consent is exactly what they're asking for when they say, "Do you mind if I take a look?" 90% of people say, "Sure, go ahead," because they think, "I have nothing to hide." And that is a beautiful, innocent, dangerous thought, because you might have nothing illegal, but that doesn't mean they won't find something that looks suspicious. A prescription bottle that isn't yours, a friend's backpack in the back seat, a smell they claim to detect. Once you give consent, you have waived your Fourth Amendment rights, and you cannot take that back. So let me give you another script. When they ask, "Do you mind if I search the car?" you say, calmly, respectfully, "Officer, I do not consent to any searches." That's it. You don't need to give a reason. You don't need to say, "Because I know my rights." You just state it plainly. And if they ask why, you say, "I'm not refusing to cooperate. I'm simply not giving consent." And then you stay quiet. You let them decide their next move. Most of the time, if they don't have probable cause, they will finish the stop and let you go. If they search anyway, your lawyer will have a field day getting that evidence thrown out. But we need to go back to that first question for a moment, because I promised you a progressive reveal, and here's the layer that almost no YouTube video will tell you. There is a second version of this question, a more dangerous version. It comes not during a traffic stop, but during a police interview. A detective sitting across from you in a small room, and they lean forward and say, "Can you think of any reason why you might be sitting here right now?" Same psychology, different context. And in that context, what you say can literally send you to prison. I'm not exaggerating. There is a famous case from California, a man named Michael. He was brought in for questioning about a robbery. He was innocent, completely innocent. The detective asked him, "Is there any reason your DNA might be at that crime scene?" And Michael, trying to be helpful, trying to cooperate, said, "Well, I was in that neighborhood last week for work. I might have touched something." He thought he was explaining. He thought he was being transparent. What he actually did was give the detective a theory, a narrative. They didn't have his DNA. They didn't have any evidence linking him. But his own statement, his own casual, innocent speculation became the centerpiece of the prosecution's case. He spent 18 months and over $50,000 on legal fees before the real perpetrator was caught. Never speculate with police. If you don't know something for a fact, you do not guess. You do not theorize. You do not try to be helpful. You say, "I don't answer questions without my attorney present." That's not rude. That's not suspicious. That's smart, and it's your constitutional right. Now, I want to address the pushback I know some of you are feeling right now. Some of you are thinking, "This sounds paranoid. I've been pulled over before. I answered the question, nothing bad happened." And you're right. Most of the time, nothing bad happens. Most traffic stops are routine. Most officers are decent people doing a difficult job. I'm not telling you to be afraid of the police. I'm telling you to be informed. Because the one time something bad does happen, the one time you get an officer who is having a bad day or looking to make quota, or who misinterprets your nervousness as guilt, that one time is all it takes. And you don't get a do-over. Here's a hard truth. The legal system is not designed to protect innocent people who talk too much. It's designed to process cases efficiently. And the most efficient case is one where the defendant has already confessed, admitted, or consented. You have the right to remain silent for a reason. That reason is not to protect guilty people. It's to protect everyone. Because in the heat of the moment, under the lights, with your heart pounding, you will say things that are not accurate. You will say things that can be twisted. You will try to fill the silence with words, and those words will be used. So let me leave you with a final psychological frame. Every time an officer asks you a question, imagine that a prosecutor is standing right next to them with a microphone. Imagine that everything you say is being recorded, because it is. Body cams, dash cams, audio recorders. And imagine that anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. That's not paranoia, that's the Miranda warning verbatim. And it exists for a reason. The smart move is not to outsmart the officer. You won't. They do this every day. The smart move is to not play the game at all. Answer only the legally required questions. Your name, your address, your license and registration. That's it. Everything else is optional. And for that one question, do you know why I pulled you over? You now have the answer. I'm not sure, officer. I try to follow all traffic laws. Say it a few times until it feels natural, because in the moment, your brain will want to default to the old pattern, the compliance pattern, the people-pleasing pattern. You have to override it. You have to be deliberate. So here's my challenge to you. Comment right now with the word "not sure." Just put it in the comments. It's a reminder to yourself, a digital anchor. And then share this video with someone you care about. Your mom, your brother, your friend who drives late at night. Because most people will go their whole lives without knowing this. And that one wrong answer could cost them more than a ticket. It could cost them their freedom. You are now one of the very few who understands how this game is played. That doesn't make you invincible, but it makes you prepared. And preparation is the only real power any of us have. Stay safe, stay smart. And remember, silence is not weakness. Sometimes it's the strongest answer you can give.